Good morning and welcome to Business Buzz. Coming up, the government marks 3 years of reform with its own scorecard, claiming hard-won gains while admitting the pain for households is not yet over. The Nigerian exchange falls again as another session ends in the red. A record at the ports as Lagos Customs posts its biggest single day ever. And President Trump threatens to crush Iran's economy and the price of oil climbs in response. I am Louisa Asidi. Stay with us. We begin with the markets where the Nigerian exchange closed lower again on Thursday. The all-share index shed 712 points, a loss of 0.3% to close at 240,037 points. Market capitalization fell by some 440 billion naira to 154.98 trillion naira. Market breadth was negative, 15 stocks advanced, 32 declined, and 100 closed unchanged. Howdeni McCall led the gainers of 9.38% to 3 naira 85 kobo, followed by Trans-Nationwide Express and McNichols. International Energy Insurance pays the losers down 9.85% to 4 naira 30 kobo. In all, some 2.87 billion shares were traded, worth about 30.7 billion naira across 34,669 deals. Time now for the wider world, where a sharp rebound swept Asia before a fresh threat against Iran sent oil higher and pulled Wall Street lower. Let's start in Europe, where the session was mixed to lower. Germany's DAX fell about 0.4% to adjust under 26,000 points. The CAC 40 in Paris fell over 0.5% to about 8,450 points. London stood apart. The FTSE 100 was little changed at 10,748 points. Over in Asia, technology led a powerful recovery. South Korea's Kospi was the standout, surging nearly 6% to 6,852 points. Led by its chipmaker, SK Hynix jumped about 12% and Samsung Electronics about 9%. Japan's Nikkei rose 1.4% to 66,217 points, with memory maker Kyoha up about 6%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained 1.3% to 25,831 points. Looking at more Asian markets, the Shanghai Composite added 0.3% to 3,907 points. India's Sensex rose 0.7% to 77,423 points. Australia's S&P ASX added 0.2% to 9,069 points, while Taiwan's TAIEX was flat at 44,711 points. Now turning to Africa, where it was a mixed session across the continent's major exchanges. In South Africa, the largest market, the Johannesburg All-Share fell about 0.3% to 111,493 points. Egypt's main index in Cairo, the EGX30, dropped 1.4% to 54,513 points. Morocco's Marsi index in Casablanca was little changed at around 17,800 points. In Ghana, the composite index was broadly flat at around 15,200 points. Kenya's Nairobi All-Share was steady at around 242 points. And in Zimbabwe, the All-Share index rose 0.4% to 481 points. Now to energy and commodities, where oil surged. Prices jumped after President Trump announced what he called a crushing economic operation against Iran and threatened consequences for any country that keeps trading with Tehran. The move came after a day the United Arab Emirates suspended its financial ties with Iran. Against that backdrop, Brent crude, the international standard, climbed more than 4% to around $95 a barrel. United States benchmark crude rose about 2.5% to around $87 a barrel. Natural gas fell about 2% to around $2.75 per million British thermal units. Gold was little changed, easing about 0.2% to roughly $4,540 an ounce. And back on Wall Street, stocks fell, giving back the previous session's gains as bond yields rebounded. The S&P 500 was down about 0.7% at around 7,650 points, having closed the day before at 7,708. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down about 1.2%, and the Nasdaq Composite fell about 0.9%. Let's take a quick break. When we return, more Business Buzz. Welcome back. Now, let's take a look at Nigeria's insurance sector where the public have mixed reactions. Nigeria's insurance sector is in a paradox. Premium income is growing, yet insurance penetration remains stubbornly below 1% of GDP. For most individuals, families, and small businesses, insurance is still seen as an optional expense, not a shield against livestock. From medical emergencies and car accidents to fire outbreaks and business interruptions, one bad event can wipe out years of savings. Yet, many Nigerians stay uninsured, citing distrust over claims, confusing policy terms, affordability pressures, and a belief that it won't happen to me. Regulators are pushing change. The Nigerian Insurance Industry Reform Act 2025 raises capital thresholds and emphasizes prompt claims settlement to rebuild confidence, while NACOM is calling for more customer-centric products and better use of technology to reach the unbanked and informal sectors. However, will recapitalization and policy fixes translate into real coverage for households and MSMEs? What must insurers, brokers, and fintechs do differently to make insurance simple, affordable, and trustworthy? To unpack this, we will be joined by Lucky Enakiriri, a financial analyst and the former Dean of Student Affairs at Dennis Osebede University, just right after this break. Welcome back. We're back with Lucky Enakiriri, a financial analyst and the former Dean of Student Affairs at Dennis Osebede University. So you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's so lovely to have you here once again with us at the studio.
It's always my pleasure.
Okay, sir. So I have a couple of questions, but first of all, let's start with this. Nigeria's insurance penetration is still below 1% of GDP. Now, in plain language, what does that number mean for the average households and a small business owner?
It simply means that many people are not taking up insurance covers in Nigeria. Nigeria is below 1% as if you compare to a country like South Africa, where you have about 5%, and the global average, which is about 7%. What it simply means is that many Nigerians are exposed. And if something happens, there is no coverage for them.
There's no coverage for them. So it means that a lot of Nigerians are not covered by the insurance, right?
That's the pure meaning of it.
Okay. From your experience, what do you think are the top 3 reasons individuals and families avoid buying insurance in Nigeria today?
I will put the top 3 reasons, or rather, let me broadly categorize them into trust, access, and then the economy. Trust, most Nigerians feel or do not trust the insurance companies. As a result of 1 or 2 experiences that they've had, And you know, the funny thing, the big thing about the country where we live is that bad news travels very fast compared to good one. And the insurance companies will pay compensation to 10 persons or even more, and nobody will hear about it. But that one person that was delayed as a result of one thing or the other, almost everyone will hear about it. So this makes Nigerians not to trust the insurance company. They will tell you that payment is delayed. When you ask them to come and pay for this because something is destroyed which you have insured, it takes months. They will ask so many questions, this and that. So people say, instead of me doing that, why don't I just keep my money? And it's better for me. So we have that trust factor that is in the economy of Nigeria. And then we have the second one, which is also economy or economies. Here we have a huge problem. People who have not been able to feed themselves. Now, in the scale of preference, somebody will put taking care of his family as a priority. Now, those who have not been able to take care of themselves, buy food, pay fees, and you ask them to come and take insurance cover, they will tell you, where are we going to get the money from? And that is where a major problem that we have in Nigeria, because income is low, the economy is struggling, and people want to prioritize that which will make them survive. It's a survival mode. So they want to survive first before thinking of insurance cover. And when you ask them, so what happened in times of so and so, they say, don't worry, God will take care of that. And we have that. So it's a big issue in Nigeria. And then we have the assets, where we talk of insurance coverage in Nigeria. If you look at it today, you discover that you cannot wake up right now and say, let me pick up my phone or my computer and get an insurance cover. No. You often will see the agents coming in to tell us about insurance. And if I will have problem with the way the agents sell their insurance products, because it's a product anyway. The way they sell it is funny. They seem to be selling it as an investment product instead of a risk management product. And that on its own is somehow. And people will tell you that, look, if it is an investment product, why don't I just leave my money in the bank so that it can yield more return to me instead of putting it somewhere where I may not have access to it or in one thing or the other? So we need to change our approach. But outside that, apart from these agents that are coming to tell us about insurance, when they come, they sell a policy to you and then they disappear. You're never going to see them again. There's no follow-up. Then outside that, how many of these agents are in the rural community where we have Nigerians residing? So you just have a pocket of them in the major cities. And even in the major cities, how many persons have been educated and told about insurance? So we have this issue of access, the economy and trust. And then we have the other factor, which I will not forget. There are many other factors anyway. You asked me for 3, but let me add this other one. The other one is our culture, our cultural bias. It's a problem for us. And you know, when we talk about, if I'm an agent and I come to you right now and say that, please, do you mind taking a life insurance? When you die after so and so time, we'll be able to pay. You say, God forbid. So we have this cultural issue that is preventing us from buying into products that should be bought into. And then we also have this kind of culture that is in existence, a family setting that has to do with Osusu. When a problem arises, we'll rather contribute money from every family or meet friends and family to get the money for you. Because of that, Nigerians will not be bothered about mitigating such risk in the future because families will always be there to contribute. So this cultural bias is there. And when you tell them, so, okay, let's go for this, they say, no, God will take care of it. What if an accident happens? You say, no, God forbid, it will not happen to me. And nobody plans for it. So these are some of the issues that are resulting. If you tell someone today that, look, this is your house, you need to insure it. In case there is a flood, he said, no, God will push the flood away. If God stops the rain, how will the farmers do or fare? So these are some of the things that are there. There are so many others, but you asked for 3 and I gave you 4.
Okay, you gave me a lot more. Now, for small and medium businesses, what do you think are the most common insurance gaps you see? And what typically happens when a shock like fire, theft, or business interruption hits?
You see, there is, let me begin by saying that the factors we have discussed already come to play here. And there is another factor, which if you allowed me, I would have added, which is product mismatch. Most products of insurance in Nigeria are designed for the big companies. The bigger companies are able to pay bigger premium to be insured. And the smaller companies are unable to afford all of that. So there is no product per se designed specifically for the small business owners or individual with low income. That is where we have an issue. So for such businesses, you can't afford to pay such a high premium. And because of that, you rather leave your business uninsured. In addition to lack of education. When that happens, fire disaster, whatever disaster that happens, the business is not insured. And that is why you see, as soon as these things happen, you see that the business goes down the drain completely, or friends or family rally around to be able to raise it again. So we have this gap. If we find a product that is tailor-made to them, people will begin to buy in. Let's see, I'll rather go for an insurance coverage that will allow me to pay, let's say, 5,000 naira a month. And that amounts to about 60,000 in a year and be covered than for you to tell me that I should come in and pay 1 million naira. Where am I going to get the money from? How much am I in it from my business? So these are some of the problems that we have, and it's creating that gap. But the insurance company, I think recently they've been trying to adapt to the environment where we find ourselves. And they can do better by bringing in products or services that match these small business owners and as well as individuals in the society. Because we talk about business, it's not only business. Everyone needs to be insured somehow, anyhow. Maybe health insurance, maybe life insurance.
Okay. Now, you often hear many people say they don't need insurance. Now, how would you reframe insurance in a way that it feels essential instead of it being an option?
I said something earlier that the way we market insurance in Nigeria is like an investment. And it's not an investment. We should be able to market insurance to people as a risk management strategy, mitigating against future occurrence. And these things must happen. We have abundance of examples in Nigeria that has happened in time past that we can use as a basis to market this product and sell to people. People often say they don't need insurance because they haven't seen the need for it until they are in that problem. And then they say, oh, it is here. Let me give you an instance, which is very common. The Nigerian road, we have a lot of accidents every day, every time, due to the bad nature of the road, reckless driving, etc., etc. But do you know that of a reality, apart from third-party insurance, your vehicle is not really insured? And that also brings us to the government, because the enforceability of these insurance products is very, very low in Nigeria. And that is why we're having low penetration that is still under 1% of the GDP. So we need to tell these people that you need it. And at the same time, the government needs to step up and do what we call enforcement of insurance coverage in Nigeria. You shouldn't be building, a commercial building, for example, even a residential one, without it being insured. You shouldn't be driving a vehicle without it being comprehensively insured, not just third-party insurance, where you hit someone and then the person, you say the insurance company should go and pay for the damages of that person. What happens to your own? And at the same time, too, many Nigerians do not know our right. You see, most vehicle owners, if you ask them, what is the meaning of this, your third-party insurance? They say it's just a requirement for me to get my paper for a year. But it's not. It comes to play when you need it, when an accident happens. So we need to educate ourselves. We really need to educate ourselves about insurance, the purpose of it, so that more people will begin to know their right. Because I can tell you that most of this issue of trust, spanning from the fact that the premium, the coverage was not paid, the insurance company did not pay the damages after the problem occurred, is coming from the fact that maybe when you were filing this report, you didn't do the appropriate things, and that is education. So we need to market our products effectively in the right way, and we need to educate our people very well on insurance. And with that, you see that we begin to embrace it. There is nothing like God forbidding it, because it will happen. We can be here today in this studio and something will happen. Why do we have fire alarms in every building? Because it's anticipated that it can happen at any time.
Okay, so for young professors, or rather professionals and entrepreneurs who are watching, what are the first two types of insurance do you think they should prioritize, and what pitfalls should they avoid when buying insurance?
When you talk of young professional, you may be looking at it from the business perspective. Of course, the law provides that if you have a business which employs 3 people and above, you're supposed to have a group insurance for them. And then as an individual, you're supposed to have a group insurance for them, for the business, because anything can happen at any time. And most of the insurance, the payment could be times 3 of the annual salary. And then we should have it. As a young person, you should be looking at having your health insurance, which are mostly run by the HMOs. And then when I say HMO, we have health management organizations. And then we should be able to have life insurance. Are you going to die now? No. Why are we even in Nigeria, when somebody dies at old age, the family, children, everyone would have to gather together, put money together to do the burial? We can take some of this stress away from the children by having an insurance cover for that. And when you have a life insurance, as a young person, your risk is lower, the risk of death is lower, and your insurance premium obviously will be lower. And if you take that until old age, where the risk begin to rise and you pay all through, you discover something. At your passing, you leave both an inheritance and an insurance for your children or for your beneficiaries, which they can take. So as a young person, I will ask every young person to take a look at that. Health insurance, because health is wealth.
Yes.
And we cannot afford to joke or play with it. And for a business, a small business that is coming, you must take that group insurance to cover your employee. And then there is also another one that we can do. And when we have an insurance that covers, in case customers do come and they get injured in our business premises, you can insure against that. When they get injured, you tell them, don't worry. They go in, and that is taken care of. It can attract a lot of customers to your business, because they know if anything happens to them there, you take charge of it. The insurance company will take charge of it. We pay for both treatment and everything. So these are some of the things I will advise young professionals to engage or to buy.
Okay, so sir, it's been lovely having you here today talking on the insurance sector of Nigeria. I think I've learned a lot from you today, and I think our viewers also have learned a lot from you. So thank you so much for being here with us.
You're welcome. Don't forget that if you are not insured, you are at risk.
Yes, if you're not insured, you're at risk. Thank you so much, sir. So we'll go on a quick break. When we return, we'll look at the government's view over its 3-year reforms. Welcome back. We begin the sector round with the economy and the day's biggest story, the government's own report card on 3 years of reform. On Wednesday, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of Economy, Taiwo Oyedele, presented the Tinubu's administration's reform scorecard. It sets out how the reforms have affected government finances, the naira, reserves, investments, inflation, and everyday household welfare. And it does something unusual. It measures the reforms not only against where Nigeria was, but against where the country might have been had nothing changed at all.
We invited you here today not to declare a victory, but to give an account. For the past 3 years, the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, DCFR, has embarked on major reforms to address age-long economic challenges. The removal of a fuel subsidy that was quietly bankrupting the country, and the unification of an exchange rate system that had become a source of arbitrage, distortion, and corruption rather than stability. Those decisions came at a real cost, and we're not here to pretend otherwise. Prices rose. The naira adjusted sharply. Households and businesses felt it, and many still do. What we want to do today is put the whole picture in front of you, the Nigerian people. What those reforms cost, what they delivered, and just as importantly, what they prevented. We're calling this the Nigeria's Reform Scorecard, and it is built to be read honestly, regardless of whether you agree with the reforms.
At the center of the scorecard sits a single striking pair of numbers. The government says the reforms generated 20.4 trillion naira in extra resources. However, they also carry 30.64 trillion naira in extra costs. In other words, the bill for change has run ahead of the money it freed up. Start with the saving everyone knows about, the removal of the petrol subsidy. The government puts the total saved at 15.8 trillion naira, but the federal government kept only about a third of that, some 5.4 trillion naira, because the rest is shared with the state and local governments under the standard allocation formula.
So let me tell you about the numbers. Between June 2023 and December 2025, subsidy savings mobilized the sum of 15.8 trillion naira in resources for the Federation.
Okay, those are the figures. But the question now is, where did the money go?
So the savings showed up in the Federation accounts by way of higher revenue collections as a result of the reforms. Not just the subsidy removal, but also the exchange rate flotation, because we were subsidizing the exchange rate. And that subsidy was not going to the ordinary person or manufacturers. It was going to rent seekers.
The largest single item was wages. Price rises, the new minimum wage awards, and allowances came to 9.39 trillion naira. Servicing foreign debt, made dearer by the weaker naira, took almost as much as 9.37 trillion naira. Infrastructure took 6.47 trillion, electricity subsidies 3.14 trillion, and higher interest rates added a further 1.24 trillion in local debt costs. Set those wages rises against what the federal government actually received from the subsidy, and the scale becomes clear. Wages alone were nearly twice the federal government's own share of the subsidy savings.
So, altogether, the federal government's incremental resources over the period, remember, subsidy savings, independent revenue, and incremental borrowing, came to 20.4 trillion naira. That money did not sit idle. It partly funded incremental expenses. Okay? For that same period, the incremental expenses of the federal government alone, not the federation, was 30.64 trillion naira. Of these, 9.39 trillion went to wage adjustments, minimum wage increases, and allowances for public servants. And I think this is a point that it should be of interest to everyone. The incremental amount that the federal government spends paying higher wages is more than the entire savings that the federal government earned from subsidy removal.
The government's argument is that the new raw comparison misses the point. The real test, it says, is not this year's numbers against last year's, but this year against the crisis that reform helped avoid.
Many of us will oversimplify complex economic management issues by simply saying, what is the price of a tuber of yam today? How much was it in 2023? 1 liter of fuel. And we will conclude that the reform is not working for us, or they are even bad. We're saying there's an important comparison that we often don't avert our minds to. It's what would have been without those reforms.
And on that measure, the scorecard lays out its evidence. The cost of servicing debt, it says, has fallen from swallowing almost all government revenue, close to 100% in 2022, to around half this year. Foreign reserves have climbed from about $35 billion in May 2023 to $52.5 billion by July. The gap between the official and the street exchange rates have narrowed from more than 60% to below 5%. Foreign investment is returning. Capital brought into the country rose from just over $1 billion in early 2023 to more than $10 billion in the first quarter of this year. And the stock market has swelled from 31 trillion naira to around 150 trillion. But the scorecard is candid about the part that has not yet returned. Inflation is easing. Headline inflation has come down from over 22% to just under 16%. Food inflation from nearly 25% to about 17.5%. But prices are still rising, only more slowly, and the everyday cost of living tells its own story. Petrol has gone from about 185 naira a litre to as much as 1,400. The minimum wage over the same stretch rose from 30,000 naira to 70,000. The government's own phrase for household welfare is this: a work in progress.
Many people would ask, why are we throwing macro data all around? GDP is growing, inflation is coming down, and they say, how does that impact on the ordinary man or the average Nigerian? So we put this together as well. And you'll see that this reform is actually about the average Nigerian. Behind these figures are real, tangible changes in people's lives. Salaries and pensions paid on time, and long-standing pension arrears finally settled. Before the reform started, 27 states were struggling to pay salaries and pensions. A minimum wage more than doubled from 30,000 to 70,000. NEL Fund, now one of the most affordable student loan schemes globally, helping over 1.5 million students through school. In addition, There are cash transfers to millions of households, subsidized mortgages, agricultural support, strengthening food security, and a new tax act that exempts low-income earners and small businesses from tax, while simplifying a system that had overburdened the poor for decades. So the benefits to Nigerians are many. We decided to just share 10 of them.
On growth, the picture is firmer. The economy grew 3.89% in the first quarter, up from 2.31% 2 years earlier. Oil production has recovered from around 1.3 million barrels a day to roughly 1.7 million. The government says it has no intention of turning back. More tax reform, tighter budgeting, and a push to drag inflation down into single digits all sit on the next phase of the agenda.
None of these means the work is finished or that every household is where it needs to be. It means the direction is right and the numbers, including the costs, back that up.
So this is a report card the government has written about itself and by its own hand. It reads as steady progress against a disaster avoided. The macro numbers have turned. Reserves are up. The naira is calmer. Growth is back. The harder question, the one the scorecard leaves open, is when that stability reaches the market stall, the petrol station, and the kitchen table. Let's take a quick break. When we return, the boring deal the government won't fully explain. Welcome back. Stay with the public finances and a boring deal drawing scrutiny. The government says it will not publish the specific spending details of its $5 billion financing facility with First Abu Dhabi Bank. The facility is part of a wider $6 billion borrowing package approved by the National Assembly in March. About $1.5 billion has been drawn so far. Both the International Monetary Fund and the ratings agency Fitch has questioned the arrangement's transparency. The minister's defense is that it carries a flexible interest rate, cheaper for Nigeria if global rates fall, and that its purpose is to refinance more expensive debt, a set of clarifying notes he says will follow in the coming days. Now to trade, where the ports have delivered a revenue record. The Apapa command of the Nigeria Customs Service collected 28.1 billion naira in a single day on Tuesday, its highest ever. That beats its previous one-day record of 20.1 billion naira set last September. And in July, the same command took a record 323 billion naira for the month. The service credits tighter compliance, digital clearing, and a steadier foreign exchange market, the very currency stability the government's scorecard leans on. Now staying with the currency, which is holding its own ground. The naira closed around 1,350 to the dollar on the official market this week, steady within a narrow band. Behind that calm, French figures from the central bank covering the month of April showed demand for dollars fell sharply, down about 35% to $3.42 billion as importers of oil, food, and manufactured goods drew less. Less appetite for dollars at a time of healthier reserves is part of what is keeping the naira steady. And now in the energy sector, where cheaper diesel is redrawing the map. Trunk queues have returned to the Dangote refinery as marketers chase its diesel price. The plant sold diesel at 1,580 naira a litre this week, as much as 70 to 85 naira below rival depots in Lagos. On a full tanker load, that gap runs into millions of naira a trip. This is a sign of how sharply the refinery's pricing now steers where the country's fuel marketers choose to load. One more break, still ahead, a warning light over Africa's most industrialized economy. Welcome back. Now to the continent and to South Africa, where the economic strain is deepening. Business insolvencies jumped by about 134% from June to July, according to the country's official statistics agency, bringing the total close to 900 so far this year. At the same time, unemployment has climbed to 33.6%, a four-year high, with the economy shedding 16,000 former jobs in the second quarter. The agency's own reading is blunt. Rising company failures and job losses are now feeding on each other, eroding confidence in Africa's most industrialized economy. Now to international business and the announcement driving markets everywhere this week. President Trump has declared what he called the most crushing economic operation ever against Iran, warning that any country giving Tehran a financial lifeline will face, in his words, tremendous consequences. This follows months of pressure since the start of the United States and Israel's war on Iran in February, including sanctions on Iranian oil, shipping and banking, and a naval blockade of its ports. The immediate effect was felt in the oil price, which jumped with Brent crude climbing back towards $95 a barrel. For Nigeria, that cuts both ways. A higher crude price lifts the country's export earnings and helps support the naira and the reserves. But it also raises the cost of the refined fuel and diesel that Nigerians still buy, feeding back into transport and food prices at home. That's all we have for you today on Business Buzz. I am Louisa Asidi. Thank you for joining us.